Part 3. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 21. Chen Tao glanced at the woman, then retracted his gaze. He opened the handcuffs on Ziking's feet. "Stop," the woman screamed, and she pulled the trigger. Bang. A bullet flew out and shot at Chen Tao's arm. Bang. The bullet hit his arm, and a burst of fire swung. The bullet twisted and fell to the ground. Chen Tao frowned and looked at the woman sideways. The woman's face changed slightly, her mouth opened slightly, her eyes trembled slightly, and she was full of disbelief. The intelligence is true, this person is really not afraid of bullets. Of course it's true, otherwise, Commander Lin Na took so many people with her, how could she fail? Then what should we do? Chen Tao looked at the woman and said lightly, "Don't annoy me, bullets are ineffective against me, but bullets are effective against you." The woman bit her lip and her face turned slightly pale. He stood up, looked at Ziking, and said, "Are you okay?" Ziking nodded slightly, and said, "They didn't do anything to me, they just asked me a few questions." She looked at Chen Tao's arm worriedly, and said, "But dear, are you okay?" She just saw the bullet hit Chen Tao's arm. Chen Tao said, "It's okay, let's go." He took Ziking's hand and led her out the door. A group of defenders blocked the door. Chen Tao's free hand pulled out the pistol from his waist. Except for the woman in the lead, the others made way. The woman was slightly startled, she looked back, and she was stunned for a moment. "You. Sister Yan, this person is not something we can deal with." "Sister Yan, retreat first and wait for support." "Yes, Sister Yan." The woman called Sister Yan bit her lip, stared at Chen Tao, and said, "You can't scare me, I'm here, don't think about going out of this door." Quite stubborn. Chen Tao raised the pistol and pointed the muzzle at the woman's knee. Bang. A gunshot. The woman fell to the ground. She was pale, her hands tightly covering her knees. Chen Tao took Ziking out of the door and left the Black Swan Security Bureau. After Chen Tao went out, he looked around. Suddenly, accompanied by a sound of wind, a black sports car stopped in front of Chen Tao and Ziking, and the door slowly opened. Chen Tao took Ziking into the car. Huh! The car turned into a black shadow and left. The people from the security bureau chased out, but they could only see a black shadow whose appearance was unclear. Through the windshield, Chen Tao looked at the scenery in front of him, and he said, "Switch to automatic driving mode." "The automatic driving mode has been switched," a neutral mechanical voice sounded. Chen Tao looked at Ziking beside him. Ziking looked at the scenery outside the car window, and she didn't say anything. She was a little absent-minded. Chen Tao retracted his gaze. "No wonder, after such a thing happened, I believe that even some courageous people may not be able to recover immediately, let alone a little woman like her." Driving for about 10 minutes. Chen Tao said, "Let's stop at a restaurant. It's almost noon now, and I haven't had breakfast yet, so I'll take a break." It's been about 10 minutes, and we're far enough away from the Black Swan Security Bureau to eat something in peace. The car slowed down. It slowly stopped in front of a restaurant. The door opened. Chen Tao got out of the car and looked at the restaurant in front of him. It was a Western restaurant. Chen Tao looked at his clothes again, which were already as tattered as a beggar's. No, these clothes were even more tattered than a beggar's. "Even if I eat breakfast in this outfit, it won't taste good. I have to change into another one." Thinking about it, Chen Tao noticed a man standing at the door of the restaurant. The man was wearing a black suit and a tie, and he looked quite handsome. His eyes were fixed on Chen Tao. Chen Tao looked at the man and walked over. When the man saw Chen Tao coming, he said, "Sir, this is a high-end restaurant. People like you who are not well dressed cannot enter." Chen Tao said, "How much did you pay for this suit?" The man was slightly startled. He looked at his suit and then at Chen Tao. Chen Tao said calmly, I will give you 10 years to buy this suit. 10 years? The man's eyes lit up slightly. But he was a little hesitant. He looked at his clothes. Chen Tao said, is 10 years not enough? How about 100 years? The man's eyes lit up. He looked at Chen Tao and smiled, okay, please follow me. There is a dressing room in the restaurant. In the restaurant? Didn't you say that I can't enter because I'm not well dressed? Chen Tao said. When the man heard this, he smiled awkwardly and said, it's okay. You are just not well dressed now. You won't be in a while. Please come in. He made a gesture of invitation. Chen Tao nodded slightly. He turned back to look at Ziking and said, you find a place to sit first, I'll go change clothes. Ziking nodded slightly, okay. Chen Tao followed the man into the restaurant. There is a dressing room in the restaurant, probably the staff's dressing room. Chen Tao came out of the dressing room, he had changed into a black suit and black leather shoes, and washed his face. Without the ragged clothes, Chen Tao's temperament also improved. He returned to the restaurant. Ziking had found a seat and sat down. Seeing Chen Tao coming out, Ziking raised her hand and waved at Chen Tao. Chen Tao walked over and sat opposite Ziking. He picked up the menu on the table and looked at it. Sir, what do you need? Chen Tao turned his head and glanced at the waitress beside him. The waitress was holding a pen and paper and looking at this side. Chen Tao said, what is your signature dish here? The waitress whispered, we have Bizhu steak from Bizhu here, which is our signature dish here. The limit is 100 servings a day, and there is still some now. Chen Tao said, 2 servings. The waitress nodded and wrote on the paper. She continued, sir, do you need anything else? Chen Tao said, 2 more glasses of the most expensive drinks here, that's it? He handed the menu to the waitress. The waitress took it and said, okay, then please wait. The waitress left. Chen Tao's eyes fell on Ziking. Ziking was wearing a black tank top, revealing her white shoulders, and the black fabric wrapped her amazing bust. She clenched her waist and her arms were slender. She had a perfect figure. She tied her hair up, revealing her delicate face. Ziking looked at Chen Tao and said, Tao, what should we do next? Chen Tao looked at Ziking. What to do, this is also the question Chen Tao wanted to know. Black Swan can't stop. They will probably continue to send people to hunt Chen Tao. This is not a good thing for Chen Tao. How to avoid the pursuit of Black Swan? Chen Tao was thinking about this question, and he said, I plan to go to Tal district. Ziking looked at Chen Tao, do you really want to go there? Tal district is a gathering place for criminals, it's very chaotic there. Chen Tao nodded slightly, it's very chaotic, but only there can the Black Swan's hand not reach out. Tal district is set as a restricted area. Tal district is a very large place, where another force is entrenched, and that force has very strong technology. Strong enough to destroy the world. Therefore, Black Swan doesn't care about going to war with Tal district easily. However, the Tal district unconditionally accepts people from the outside world. No matter who they are, once they enter the Tal district, the Black Swan cannot do anything to them. Therefore, the Tal district is a paradise for many criminals. Now Chen Tao seems to have only that place to go. This idea is crazy, but Chen Tao just wants to give it a try. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 22. Zi Ching looked at Chen Tao's expression and said, wherever you go, I will go. Chen Tao looked at Zi Ching and nodded slightly, yes. Not long after, the waitress came over with a trolley. She placed the dinner plate in front of Chen Tao. Opened the lid to reveal the tender steak inside. Chen Tao can smell the aroma of steak. She picked up the sauce and poured it directly over the steak. Zit size. Along with the strange sound, a strong aroma came to the face. So delicious. The waitress moved another piece of steak in front of Zicheng. Doing the same thing. The aroma fills the air. Chen Tao held the knife and fork. He looked at Zicheng and said with a smile, "Eat something, you haven't eaten breakfast, it's noon now." Zicheng hummed and picked up the knife and fork. He cut a piece of beef with the knife and fork and put it in his mouth. This beef is very tender and juicy. When you bite it, the juice fills your mouth, which feels particularly wonderful. Chen Tao looked at Zicheng while eating lunch. Inadvertently, he felt something strange. He turned his face slightly and met a few eyes. As soon as those people saw him, they quickly looked away. Those guests here had been eating there before Chen Tao arrived, so naturally they were not Black Swan people. The reason why they looked at Chen Tao was because Chen Tao was still being rewarded. Now that Chen Tao's face is unobstructed, with no hat or sunglasses, it's not surprising to be recognized. Chen Tao withdrew his gaze. Other side. What? This is impossible. Lin Hai held the steering wheel and frowned, listening to the sound coming from the Bluetooth headset. He was a little irritated. I have obviously hit his head with a dark silver bullet, and the person and the car fell into the sea. In that case, it is impossible to be alive. But, this is the fact. Qin Xiaoyan was shot in the knee by him with a gun, and he is still in the hospital. Lin Na's voice came from the phone. The woman named Zicheng was also taken away by that person. Lin Hai frowned. No, something must be wrong. I saw the bullet enter his forehead with my own eyes, and saw the car fall into the sea with my own eyes. He shouldn't be alive. That man is indeed strange. By the way, I just received information that someone saw Chen Tao in a Western restaurant. I will send you the location in a moment. This time, I must kill him directly. Lin Hai shook the steering wheel and said, "Okay." Listening to the beeping sound coming from the Bluetooth headset, Lin Hai frowned. What's going on? The dark silver bullet has clearly penetrated his head. How can he still be alive? Beep beep. A voice sounded in the car. Lin Hai turned sideways and looked at the screen in the car. The screen lit up and a map appeared. There was a red dot on the map. Navigation information received. Do you want to go? A mechanical voice sounded in the car. Lin Hai said, "Go." The car lights come on. Lin Hai gritted his teeth and said, "What's going on with that guy?" Lin Hai couldn't figure it out and didn't think much about it. According to the navigation information, Lin Hai came to the Western restaurant where Chen Tao was. Arriving at the entrance of the Western restaurant, the car slowly stopped. Through the glass door of the Western restaurant, Lin Hai could see Chen Tao, who was dining inside. Lin Hai frowned and stared for a long time, with a hint of doubt in his eyes. It's him, but why doesn't he have any injuries on his forehead? It's impossible. Lin Hai murmured to himself, somewhat in disbelief. He snorted, picked up the guitar bag on the passenger seat, opened the guitar bag, and took out the sniper rifle inside. After he assembled the sniper rifle, he placed it on the car window and wrapped the barrel of the sniper rifle with his suit jacket. He looked through the sniper scope and aimed at Chen Tao's head. Lin Hai said, "At such a close distance, even if your head is made of steel, it will still be penetrated." He pulled the trigger. The trigger was pulled, and bullets were spit out from the muzzle of the sniper rifle. At the moment of spitting out, bang! The whole car shook violently due to the terrifying recoil. The bullet penetrated the glass door and hit Chen Tao. Boom! The right side of Chen Tao's head was penetrated by a bullet. At the moment of penetration, Chen Tao's body was taken out by a terrifying force. It flew 2 meters, hit the wall with a bang, and fell to the ground. Ah! Screams rang out. The whole restaurant instantly became a mess. Zicheng was stunned on the spot. She turned her face and looked towards Chen Tao. She quickly got up and ran towards Chen Tao. At first glance, Zi Qing's face was pale and her eyes were full of despair. Chen Tao. She knelt down and helped Chen Tao up. Chen Tao had his eyes closed. There were bullet holes on the right side of his forehead and the left side of his forehead, and blood was flowing out. The bullet just penetrated his brain. Zi Qing's eyes trembled slightly, with only despair on her face. Lin Hai looked through the sniper scope and saw Chen Tao lying on the ground with his head penetrated. The corners of his mouth raised slightly and he said, "Call Lin Na's number." "Hello." Hearing Lin Na's voice, Lin Hai said calmly, "The mission is completed, the target has been killed." Lin Na said, "Okay, let's return to the base." Yes. Lin Hai hung up the phone and looked over there again through the sniper scope. He sneered and said, "I want to see how you can come back to life this time." Suddenly, Lin Hai's pupils condensed slightly. The blood that overflowed from the bullet hole suddenly began to flow back. A strange scene appeared. The blood flowed back into Chen Tao's bullet hole, and the bullet hole recovered at a speed visible to the naked eye. Seeing this, Lin Hai's smile slowly froze on his face. His pupils trembled, as if he had seen a ghost. Suddenly, he saw Chen Tao's eyes open. "What's going on?" Lin Hai was stunned, and before his brain could react, he suddenly found that Chen Tao's figure was gone. Zi Qing was there, but Chen Tao's figure disappeared. "Where are the people?" Lin Hai moved his eyes away from the sniper scope, and he looked through the glass door to the inside of the restaurant. Inside the restaurant, a group of people ran out frantically. The gunshot just now was obviously scared by someone. Lin Hai didn't find Chen Tao, and for a moment, Lin Hai was a little panicked, with cold sweat on his forehead. "Are you looking for me?" Suddenly, a voice sounded behind Lin Hai. Hearing this voice, Lin Hai felt that all the hairs on his body stood up. His face was pale, and he turned around subconsciously and looked behind him. There was a person sitting in the back seat of the car behind him, and it was Chen Tao. Chen Tao held a pistol in his hand and pointed it at Lin Hai. Lin Hai's pupils trembled. How did you get here?" Chen Tao said, "Do you want to know?" "Unfortunately, you will never know in this life." He put his finger on the trigger of the pistol. "No." Bang. A gunshot. Lin Hai had a bullet hole on his forehead, and he fell softly in the car, without any movement. Chen Tao put away the pistol, opened the door, and got out of the car. He glanced at Lin Hai. This guy almost took his life twice. If it weren't for the healing ability of genes, Chen Tao would probably be gone now. Although Chen Tao has a good temper, it doesn't mean that Chen Tao has no temper. For those who almost killed him repeatedly, Chen Tao felt that he could not show mercy. Chen Tao retracted his gaze and saw Ziking through the glass door. Ziking also noticed Chen Tao's position. She blinked and seemed a little surprised. Seeing Chen Tao's look, Ziking adjusted her mood and smiled. "You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. My time is running out." Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 23. The car stopped at the door, and Chen Tao waited for Zi Qing to come out. Zi Qing walked out of the door and her eyes fell on the car in front of her. Chen Tao said, "Get in the car." Chen Tao got in the car, and Zi Qing followed. The car door slowly closed. Chen Tao started the car and the car slowly flew up. As soon as Chen Tao stepped on the accelerator, flames spurted out from the 4 exhaust holes at the rear of the car. Call. The car turned into a black shadow and flew by. It feels very good to feel the powerful push from behind and enjoy the sensory stimulation brought by this terrifying speed. So fast, the speed was too fast. Feeling the terrifying speed, Zi Qing's eyes lit up slightly. Chen Tao raised his face and glanced at Zi Qing through the car's interior mirror. He smiled and stepped on the accelerator harder. The speed increases. A push came from behind. Slow down, the speed was too fast and the stimulation was too much. Zicheng's complexion changed slightly. Seeing that Zicheng couldn't bear it, Chen Tao slowly slowed down the car. Zicheng calmed down slightly, but her face turned a little pale. Chen Tao said, "Are you okay?" Zicheng nodded. She looked at Chen Tao and said, "What kind of car is this? It feels faster than the previous one." Chen Tao looked ahead. "What car?" Chen Tao really didn't know, and Xingyun didn't tell him the name of this car. Chen Tao knocked on the steering wheel and said, "Do you have a name?" "Master, I don't have a name." A mechanical and neutral voice sounded in the car. Chen Tao said, "Okay, let me give you a name. You are covered in black and you are fast. How about calling it Black Lightning?" "Thank you, Master." Black Lightning responded. Hearing this, Chen Tao nodded slightly. He looked at Zicheng and said, "This is the name of the car." Zicheng blinked. Chen Tao raised his hand and stroked Zicheng's hair, and his eyes fell on Zicheng. Zicheng was wearing a black halter top that matched her amazing figure. The black fabric was held up by the waistband to an astonishing extent, and her waist was grasped. Looking down, she is wearing a tube skirt and a pair of long black stockings. Wearing a pair of black high heels. Her long black hair was tied up, and under her bangs was her delicate face, with long eyelashes and big eyes. Black Lightning switches to autopilot mode. Chen Tao got close to Zicheng's face. Eyes facing each other. Zicheng's face turned red. Chen Tao kissed Zicheng. Zicheng's cheeks turned red. She slowly lay down on the chair. Her big eyes looked at Chen Tao, who was close at hand. She slowly closed her eyes. Inside the Black Swan Security Bureau, Lin Na looked at Lin Hai lying on the ground. She frowned, slowly squatted down, and looked at the bullet hole on Lin Hai's forehead. "Can't the dark silver bullet hurt him?" Lin Na frowned, "but, when Lin Hai contacted me, he said that it has been solved." "What does it mean?" "Sister Na, we got the surveillance video of that Western restaurant." Lin Na nodded and said, "Take a look." Video playback. Through the big screen, Lin Na saw Chen Tao being sniped to the end, with his forehead covered in blood. The dark silver bullet has hit Chen Tao's brain and penetrated through it. No one should be able to survive. Lin Na sat on the chair with her legs crossed and her hands folded across her chest, watching this scene. But the next scene made Lin Na's pupils freeze slightly. What's going on? Blood, why did the blood flow back? Look, his wounds are recovering. Everyone held their breath, and Lin Na's eyes were trembling. It's incredible. Chen Tao in the screen opened his eyes. Then, it disappeared from the screen out of thin air. What's this? No more? Where are the people? Lin Na's heart froze and she said, "Bring up the image of the entrance to the Western restaurant." The scene at the entrance of the Western restaurant was brought up. Through the screen, everyone could see an additional figure in Lin Hai's car. It was Chen Tao. Chen Tao shot and Lin Hai fell. How is that possible? How did he get out? How did he get into Lin Hai's car? Dark silver bullets can hurt him, but he will recover on his own, and the head that was penetrated is almost useless. He must be a monster. Lin Na listened to the noise next to her. She frowned and said, "Return to the scene in the restaurant and slow down 100 times. I want to see how he got out." The screen was filled 100 times. However, after Chen Tao opened his eyes, Chen Tao disappeared again. Saw nothing. At the same time as he disappeared, there was another person in the car where Lin Hai was sitting outside the Western restaurant. Lin Na frowned, slow down 100 times. But the result is still the same as before. This is not high-speed movement, this is teleportation, this is teleportation. Oh my God! How could there be such a person? What kind of technology is this? If there is such technology, if he wants to kill someone, who can escape? Suddenly everyone in the room panicked. Lin Na frowned. Teleportation, but his teleportation seems to require reaction time, otherwise, the dark silver bullet would not be able to hit him. The dark silver bullet can hurt him, and it will take time for him to recover. Before he recovers, he is in a coma, Lin Na thought, thinking, maybe we can catch him with these. Chen Tao didn't know what Lin Na was thinking. Now, he just wants to go to Tal district as soon as possible. Go to Tal district to find a place to stay. He can't stay like this forever, without even a place to stay, and be hunted down anytime and anywhere. Although Chen Tao's body is not threatened by guns, Chen Tao knows that he is not invincible. At least, in terms of strength, Chen Tao is not much different from ordinary people. Chen Tao tidied up his clothes, sat in the driver's seat, held the steering wheel, and turned his head to look at Ziking beside him. Ziking closed her eyes, lay on the chair, her cheeks flushed, and slept soundly. Chen Tao retracted his sight, drove the car, and flew towards Tal district. Tal district is called the City of Killing. No matter what happens in Tal district, no one will be surprised, that place is the representative of chaos. Tal district does not belong to the Black Swan, and Black Swan does not allow anyone to enter Tal district. Tal district is connected to the Rich district. If you want to go to Tal district, you must first enter the Rich district. The rich area and the slums are separated by a 10-meter high wall. To enter the rich area from the slums, you must pass a checkpoint. Chen Tao looked forward and saw the thick wall not far away, and there was a gate in front. The gate was wide open, but in front of the gate, there were many iron fences to stop the vehicles coming and going. At the same time, there were fully armed men holding rifles, standing guard on the left and right of the gate. Two men noticed that there was a car coming this way. One of them walked out and wanted to stop the car. Chen Tao is now wanted by Black Swan. If he stops here, he will probably be in trouble. Therefore, Chen Tao stepped on the accelerator directly. Whoosh! The wind whistled. The man found that the car that was just in front of him was gone. What's going on? The man was a little confused. The iron fence can indeed stop ordinary cars, but the problem is that Chen Tao's car can be more than 2 meters above the ground, and the fence is only half a meter high, so of course it is impossible to stop it. Moreover, after Chen Tao accelerated, the terrifying speed was so fast that ordinary people could not even see it. Chen Tao drove directly through the checkpoint. The two guards didn't even know what was going on. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 24. As soon as the car drove into the rich area, Chen Tao clearly felt the difference between the rich area and the slum area. In the slums, most of the houses are 2 or 3 stories, and some of them are old. But this wealthy area is full of high-rise buildings, which are very luxurious. Everyone walking on the streets is dressed in luxurious clothes, walks unhurriedly, and behaves elegantly and casually. This state is rare in slums. Every second in slums is precious, so whether you are walking or doing things, speed is the main priority. Taking a leisurely walk on the streets is rare in the slums. This is the special thing about the rich district. Chen Tao looked at it and didn't care. His goal was not the rich area, but the Tal district. Chen Tao was familiar with the slum area, but he didn't understand the rich area. Chen Tao said, "Black Lightning, navigate to Tal district and go to Tal district." The lights of the car came on, and the car actively switched to autonomous driving mode. Chen Tao was free and his eyes fell on Ziqing beside him. Ziqing still closed her eyes and fell asleep. Seeing this, Chen Tao smiled, raised his hand and stroked her hair. He retracted his hand and didn't bother her, just looking at the road outside the car window. Black Lightning is very fast, but the rich area is too big. No matter how fast, There is no way to reach the Tal district in a short time. The sky gradually darkened. It's already night. Zicheng has also woken up. Chen Tao looked at Zicheng and said, let's find a place to have dinner, take a rest, and continue our journey tomorrow. Eating and rest are both very important. Although you don't move in the car, it consumes energy. It is necessary to replenish physical strength and mental energy. Zicheng nodded slightly. She looked at Chen Tao and said with a smile, I will listen to you. Chen Tao said, Lightning, find a hotel first. Black Lightning's headlights turned on. After a while, the car slowly stopped in front of a hotel. The car door opens. Chen Tao and Zicheng got out of the car together. The two entered the hotel. There was a woman in professional attire sitting at the counter. When the woman saw Chen Tao and Zicheng come in, she stood up, looked at the two of them, with a professional smile on her face, and said with a smile, Welcome, can I help you? Chen Tao said, Give me an apartment and get us some food. The woman nodded slightly and said, We have 3 types of rooms, upper, middle and lower. Which one do you want? Top, middle, and bottom. Chen Tao looked at the woman and said, Is there any difference? The woman smiled leisurely and said, The price of 1 night in the middle room is 1 year, the price of 1 night in the middle room is 200 days, and the price of 1 night in the middle room is 100 days. She continued, The upper room has a good environment, large space, and various services. You can get whatever services you want. The environment and space of the middle room are slightly worse than those of the upper room, and the lower room is even worse. The girl looked at Zicheng next to Chen Tao. She looked at Chen Tao with a professional smile on her face. She was respectful and polite. She said, Sir, I recommend you to use the middle room. Although that room is not on the upper floor, the room was so nice but quite comfortable. Chen Tao said, Give me a room. The waitress smiled slightly and said, Okay, let me register. Sir, please show your identification. Chen Tao frowned slightly. Chen Tao is wanted now. If Chen Tao's identity is used as proof, wouldn't the Black Swan people know Chen Tao's location instantly? The question says that you need proof of identity to stay in a hotel. What to do? Seeing Chen Tao's hesitation, the waitress looked at Chen Tao and said, Sir, do you have any questions? Chen Tao said, I forgot to bring my ID. When the waitress heard this, she smiled and said, It doesn't matter. If this lady has it, that's fine. Chen Tao said, She came out in a hurry and she forgot to bring it. Chen Tao is wanted. Although Zicheng is not wanted, Chen Tao believes that the people in Black Swan are not so stupid that they would not even monitor the people closest to Chen Tao. As long as Black Swan monitors Zicheng, Black Swan will immediately know Chen Tao's location as soon as Zicheng uses her identity certificate. The waitress blinked, looked at Chen Tao, smiled awkwardly, and said, Sir, please don't joke. Our hotel is a legal hotel, and I can't let you check in without identification. Chen Tao looked at the waitress and said, How much is your monthly salary? When the waitress heard this, she blinked, looked at Chen Tao, and said, What are you doing? Chen Tao said, I will treat your monthly salary as 1 year, okay. I will give you 10 years, and you will arrange a house. The waitress pursed her lower lip, looked at Chen Tao, and said with a smile, Sir, you are making things difficult for me. 50 years, Chen Tao said. The waitress was slightly stunned. She hesitated quietly and said, Sir. 100 years. Chen Tao looked into her eyes and continued. The waitress looked at Chen Tao, then turned her face and looked at the door of the back room. She looked away, then put her hand on the computer keyboard and tapped. Then she left the drawer and took out a bunch of keys. She said, This is the key to the room. She looked at Chen Tao and said, Follow me. With that said, she walked out from the counter, and then said to the back room, Xiao Nan, help me look at the counter, I'll leave for a while. Okay, a girl's voice sounded in the room. The woman took Chen Tao to the elevator. Chen Tao and Zi Ching followed her. I took the elevator up to the 9th floor and came to the door of a room. The woman looked at Chen Tao and said, "You can give me the time now. You give me the time and I will give you the key." She was afraid that Chen Tao wouldn't give him time. Chen Tao stretched out his hand to the woman. The woman raised her wrist. Their wrists touched. It can be seen that the time displayed on the woman's wrist increases at a speed visible to the naked eye. Soon, the time on the woman's wrist was increased by 102 years. There was joy on her little face. Chen Tao took back his hand. The woman held the time on her wrist and looked at Chen Tao. "Why 102? Chen Tao said, "The extra 2 years are for the room fee, and the other year is the tip for you." The woman said, "That's so generous." She handed the key to Chen Tao. Chen Tao took it. "I'm leaving first." The woman turned around and left. Looking at the woman's back, Chen Tao said, "Can I ask you a question?" The woman paused and looked at Chen Tao. Chen Tao said, "Whose identity did you use to register?" The woman looked at Chen Tao and said, "Use mine." Chen Tao nodded slightly, "I understand." The woman looked away. "By the way, if you want something to eat, you can directly use the phone inside to contact the waiter." Chen Tao said, "In this case, will it be known that you opened a room for us to live in?" She looked at Chen Tao and said, "We are registering just to deal with Black Swan's request. We won't care too much about anything else. Just don't worry. My time is running out." Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 25. Hearing what the waitress said, Chen Tao nodded slightly. The waitress left. "Why didn't she stay at the counter and wait for you to pay before opening a room for us?" Ziking asked beside him. Chen Tao looked at Ziking. Ziking looked at the back of the waitress leaving. Chen Tao raised his hand, stroked Ziking's hair, and said, "There must be surveillance at the counter. She is afraid of being discovered by someone with ulterior motives. If someone sees her at the counter and directly dealing with customers, she will lose her job." Ziking raised her face and looked up. She said, "But there are surveillance cameras here too." Chen Tao looked in the direction that Ziking was looking at the surveillance camera just above the corridor. In the corridors of hotel rooms, there are usually surveillance cameras. Chen Tao said, "Some guests have the habit of tipping. If they trade here, even if the surveillance camera sees it, others will only think that we tipped her." "So that's the case." Ziking nodded slightly. He picked up the key, opened the door, and took Ziking into the room. This is the upper room, the highest standard room in this hotel. As soon as he entered the door, Chen Tao saw the spacious hall. The hall was very spacious, with sofas and TVs. It was very large and the decoration was exquisite. This level of decoration is impossible to find in the slums. It is worthy of being a hotel in the rich area. It is completely different from the slums, Ziking said with emotion. Chen Tao also felt the same way, but of course he didn't say it out loud. Ziking sat on the sofa by herself. She looked at Chen Tao and said with a smile, "Tao, this sofa is so soft and so comfortable to sit on." Hearing this, Chen Tao smiled. He sat next to Ziking, raised his hand and gently hugged Ziking's shoulders. The two leaned against each other, and Ziking was slightly startled. She raised her face and looked at Chen Tao. Their eyes met. Chen Tao leaned down and kissed her. Their lips parted. Ziking's face was flushed, and she said, "I'm going to take a shower." Chen Tao nodded slightly. Ziking got up from Chen Tao's arms. Chen Tao looked at Ziking's back. A black tank top with a round leather skirt and black stockings. Fits Ziking's mature and perfect figure. Chen Tao watched Ziking go into the bathroom. His eyes fell on the table, where there was a landline phone. He picked up the landline phone and dialed the hotel number. Does the guest need any service? A gentle female voice came from the other end of the phone. Chen Tao said, does your hotel have any delicious food? Yes, this season is the season for crabs. Our hotel has the most delicious butter crabs, which can be used to make a variety of dishes. In addition to butter crabs, there are also a variety of dishes. There is a corresponding menu on the table in your room. You can take a look. The waitress's voice was gentle. Chen Tao noticed the menu on the table. He picked up the menu and took a look. He retracted his eyes and said, I won't look at the menu. First, 2 steamed butter crabs, and then you can bring 2 of each of the 10 most expensive dishes in your hotel. In addition, a bottle of the most expensive wine. After Chen Tao got endless time, he was chased by the black swan before he could calm down and enjoy it. Now that I have the chance, I have to eat well. Hiss. The waitress on the other end of the phone seemed to take a breath of cold air. She hesitated a little and said, Sir, in that case, the price is not low. Chen Tao said, just take it up. He hung up the phone. It's evening now. I haven't had dinner yet, so of course I have to deal with it. Chen Tao got up and looked around. His eyes couldn't help but fall on the floor-to-ceiling window not far away. Through the reflection on the glass of the floor-to-ceiling window, he could see himself inside. Chen Tao frowned slightly. Now he is wanted by Black Swan. Looking at the waitress just now, she didn't recognize Chen Tao's identity. This is normal, after all, not everyone watches the news. But if you keep showing this face, it will eventually be noticed. This hotel can't stay for long. After finishing dinner and taking a nap, leave quickly. Chen Tao made a decision. Chen Tao's decision was right. The waitress did not recognize Chen Tao's identity. However, he underestimated the tracking ability of Black Swan. Chen Tao left the Western restaurant. Knowing this information, Lin Na called up all the surveillance videos within 10 miles of the Western restaurant. Although the speed of black lightning cannot be seen with the naked eye, it can still be noticed by slowing down the speed of the surveillance video. After finding Chen Tao's location, the people of Black Swan started to act again. Chen Tao didn't know about this. After all, he was not a professional in tracking. Chen Tao was sitting on the sofa, watching TV, killing time while waiting for dinner to come. Outside the door. That room, right, Lei Yonghui, one of the members of Black Swan, changed into a professional suit worn by a waiter. She looked at the waitress next to her and asked. Next to Lei Yonghui was the waitress who had a deal with Chen Tao. The waitress nodded slightly. Lei Yonghui stared at the room where Chen Tao was. She said lightly, I know, you go back and continue your work. The waitress nodded and walked away. Lei Yonghui tidied up her waitress clothes, looked at the dining cart in front of her, and then pushed the dining cart towards the room where Chen Tao was. The dishes on the dining cart were exactly what Chen Tao ordered. But the difference was that Lei Yonghui had put drugs in these dishes. Lin Na told Lei Yonghui her analysis. Chen Tao's body was extremely hard, and only dark silver bullets were useful, and they had to be used in conjunction with sniper rifles to produce explosive lethality to cause Chen Tao to be temporarily unconscious, but unable to kill him. Therefore, Lin Na planned to change the method. It was difficult for firearms to cause harm to Chen Tao, so she used drugs. Although the means were a bit despicable, in order to maintain the order of time, even if it was despicable, it had to be done. Lei Yonghui came to the door. She raised her hand and knocked on the door. Sir, the meal you ordered has arrived. Lei Yonghui heard footsteps coming from inside the house. Click the sound of the door handle being turned. Creaking. The door slowly opened. Lei Yonghui raised her face and saw Chen Tao. Looking at the familiar face in front of her, Lei Yonghui adjusted her mood and said, I'm here to deliver the food. Hearing this, Chen Tao turned around, turned his back to Lei Yonghui, and said, come in. Chen Tao returned to the sofa and sat down. He looked at Lei Yonghui. The professional suit outlined Lei Yonghui's almost mature figure, her waist was grasped, and her upper body pushed the fabric up very high. The round skirt was matched with flesh-colored stockings. She was wearing a pair of black high heels. Lei Yonghui pushed the dining cart to the table, picked up the dishes one by one, and put them on the table. She was serious. After putting the things down, Lei Yonghui said, "I'll go out first." Chen Tao looked at the wine bottle on the table and said, "Open the wine." The mouth of the bottle was plugged in with a cork. Chen Tao had never drunk this kind of wine, and he had never opened this kind of wine bottle. He didn't want to be embarrassed in order to open a bottle of wine. When Lei Yonghui heard this, she looked at the bottle of wine. As a member of the wealthy area, Lei Yonghui has of course drunk wine. She always likes to open a bottle of red wine before going to sleep, but Lei Yonghui has never drunk such high-end wine, and has never touched such a high-end bottle. Ask her to open the wine? If she does not do it well, won't he find out the problem? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 26. Lei Yonghui hesitated for a moment, fearing that she would arouse Chen Tao's suspicion, so she approached expressionlessly, holding the wine bottle and the corkscrew. She fumbled around, put the corkscrew into the wine bottle, and pulled out the cork. Seeing the cork pulled out, Lei Yonghui breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, she had experience in opening wine before. Lei Yonghui took out the wine glass, placed it in front of Chen Tao, and then held the wine glass to help Chen Tao pour it. After pouring it, she put the wine bottle down and said, "Then, I won't bother you." Chen Tao picked up the wine glass, smelled the wine, and said, "Yeah." Lei Yonghui pushed the dining cart away. After Lei Yonghui left, she turned up her collar, revealing the microphone installed on the inside of her collar, and said, "The mission is completed, the food has been delivered, and the monitor has been installed." OK. Lin Na's voice came from the earphone. In the living room where Chen Tao was, a mini monitor was placed next to the vase, and the camera was facing Chen Tao. Chen Tao didn't notice it. He held the wine glass and looked at the scarlet liquid in the wine glass. He could smell the wine, which was very special. No wonder it was the most expensive wine in this hotel. It was still a little special. Chen Tao could see the door in the hall through the glass of the wine glass. Seeing this door, Chen Tao thought of the back of the waitress who had just left. Strange. Chen Tao didn't feel strange just now, but now he thought about it carefully, he felt something was wrong. As far as he knew, if he bought such expensive wine in such a hotel, shouldn't the waiter help Chen Tao introduce their products and help Chen Tao open the wine? Although Chen Tao had never stayed in such a hotel, Chen Tao could be sure that the waiters in such a high-end hotel should not be like that woman. Not only did the woman not introduce herself, she left after putting the things down, as if she couldn't wait to leave. Chen Tao was thinking. Am I too sensitive? Chen Tao thought about it. Thinking back, it might be that he misunderstood the hotel service in the rich area, or that the waitress was a newcomer. All of these are possible and can be explained. No. Chen Tao thought it was better to be careful. The situation is special now, so it is best to prepare for the worst. If that woman is a member of Black Swan, what will she do? Chen Tao looked at the scarlet liquid in the wine glass in his hand. Drugged. Chen Tao slowly put down the wine glass. No, if it was drugged, she didn't need to come in directly. Wouldn't it be better to find a real waiter directly? There wouldn't be too many loopholes this way. Then, is it to install a bug or something? Chen Tao's eyes were shining with blue light, and blue codes passed through them. For a moment, time stopped, and everything around turned into blue codes. Chen Tao looked around, and suddenly, his sight fell on the code at the mouth of the vase. There were a little more codes there, as if someone had probably put something at the mouth of the vase. The location of this vase is at the entrance of the room and is used for decoration. If the woman just wanted to put a surveillance camera, she would have been very close to this when she pushed the dining cart, and it was almost a perfect place. But now that thing is in code state. Chen Tao couldn't tell what that thing was. Chen Tao thought about it, and he chose not to disturb Zheng Shi, and sat down in his original position. Time resumed flowing. In the room downstairs from Chen Tao. This room has been requisitioned by Black Swan. There is a computer in this room, and the picture played in the computer is exactly the picture of Chen Tao sitting on the sofa. In the room, Lin Na sat on a chair, crossed her legs, and crossed her arms around her chest, looking at Chen Tao on the TV screen. Wait until he finishes eating and the drug takes effect, and then we will bring people in, Lin Na said lightly. Okay, Qin Xiaoyan responded. Lin Na looked at Qin Xiaoyan, glanced at Qin Xiaoyan's knee, and said, "Is your knee okay?" Qin Xiaoyan said, "Thank you Sister Na for your concern, I'm fine now." Black Swan's technology is the world's top, and medical technology is combined with top technology. If it were in the past, it would be impossible to recover from a serious injury like Qin Xiaoyan's without 3 or 4 months. But now it only takes half a day, and it can basically be healed. As long as they didn't die on the spot, they could basically be saved if they went to the hospital. Lin Na retracted her gaze and looked at the screen. In the room, Chen Tao walked with a wine glass in his hand. He walked to the French window, but he took the opportunity to glance at the direction of the vase. At a glance, he noticed a small camera placed on the edge of the vase. Seeing the camera, Chen Tao's heart sank. He retracted his gaze and held the wine glass in his hand. Sure enough, the Black Swan people came. It was really restless. Tap tap. Chen Tao heard footsteps. He looked towards the source of the sound. Ziking walked out of the bathroom. Looking at Ziking in front of him, Chen Tao's eyes lit up slightly. Ziking was wearing a white bathrobe, the belt of the bathrobe tied around her slender waist, and her bust held the bathrobe high. She was tall and slender. She had a head tied up and naturally draped over her shoulders. She had a delicate face, a pair of big eyes under her narrow eyelashes. Seeing Chen Tao coming, Ziking smiled. Chen Tao put the wine glass on the table without saying anything, approached Ziking, picked her up horizontally, and walked to the bedroom. Ziking was stunned for a moment, her face flushed. "Let's eat first." Chen Tao said, "The food is not as delicious as yours." Ziqing's face turned redder, and her little head rested on Chen Tao's chest. Chen Tao carried Ziqing into the bedroom and closed the door. Lin Na saw this through the screen, and she frowned. As soon as he closed the door, Chen Tao's expression became serious and he said, "The people from Black Swan are here." Ziqing was startled. She raised her face and looked at Chen Tao. Chen Tao looked at Ziqing and said, "Just now they had people pretending to be waiters to deliver food to us." She installed a monitor in the living room. I think it also has an eavesdropping function. I suspect that in addition to installing monitors, the food we ate was tampered with. We can't eat today's dinner. Ziqing looked a little more nervous and said, "What should we do?" Hearing this, Chen Tao looked at Ziqing and said, "I will take you away." Do I need to do something?" Ziqing looked at him. Chen Tao said, "Just close your eyes." Ziqing hummed and closed her eyes. Chen Tao's eyes flashed with blue codes, and the surroundings turned into code time, and time paused. Chen Tao opened the door created by the code, hugged Ziqing and walked out calmly. He went downstairs along the corridor and left the hotel. Chen Tao looked around. I wonder if Black Lightning is in a suspended state of time now. Chen Tao discovered that sometimes, his car would not change to the code state, and sometimes he would go there. He doesn't know the logic. Chen Tao's heart moved. Yes, this Xingyun knows, it should understand. Chen Tao said, Nebula, if I want black lightning to move while time is still, can I do it? The real world is the surface world, and this world is the inner world. These codes in the inner world are what constitute the surface world. Of course, if you need, you can always convert the things in the inner world into the things in the outer world mechanically. The voice sounded in Chen Tao's mind. It was Nebula's voice. Chen Tao said, what should I do? As long as you want, you can do it. This is a function supported by your own genes, Nebula replied. Chen Tao was slightly startled. I can do it if I want to. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 27. If I think it can be done, that is. Chen Tao said, Black lightning, come here. Uh-huh. A black shadow flew from a distance, it was black lightning. Chen Tao's eyes lit up. He had just thought about let the black lightning move, and as a result, the black lightning changed from the inner world to the existence of the outer world. Indeed it is. Chen Tao understood. The car slowly stopped beside Chen Tao, and the door opened automatically. Previously, the reason why the car driven by Chen Tao could still keep its original condition and drive in the other world was because of Chen Tao's influence. It's just that Chen Tao subconsciously didn't want it to enter code mode at the time, but now Chen Tao actively requests it, and the result is the same. Chen Tao didn't think too much and put Zi Ching, who was in code mode, into the passenger seat. Chen Tao got into the driver's seat and drove away quickly. Ahead, a group of immobilized pedestrians were crossing the road. Chen Tao drove his black lightning and flew directly over the heads of the pedestrians. When black lightning is traveling, it can be more than 2 meters above the ground. Chen Tao drove for half an hour, after making sure that Black Swan's people could not catch up. Time resumes its flow. Zi Ching came back to her senses and realized she was in the car. She looked around. Having already seen many of Chen Tao's special abilities, Zi Ching was not so surprised by her sudden appearance in the car. Other side. The members of Black Swan were still in the room, staring at the computer screen. But in the computer screen, there was an empty living room, and the bedroom door was closed. These two guys are too self-aware. They are being hunted by our Black Swans, but they can still be so relaxed and do things like that, a male defender said in order to ease the embarrassment. Lin Na crossed her chest with her hands and leaned against the back of the chair. She frowned slightly while watching the scene and said nothing. This is normal, after all, men love women. They are lovers in the first place. Someone said. Listen to the discussion next to you. Qin Xiao Yan on the side frowned slightly and said, Sister Na. I don't feel right. Lin Na said, how to say? Qin Xiao Yan said, we have seen the surveillance. After Chen Tao and Zi Ching left the Western restaurant, they drove all the way here. Before they came here, they had no chance to have dinner at all, so Chen Tao took the risk of being found by us, came to this hotel to eat, but now that the food has just been served, they did not eat it while it was hot. I feel weird, Qin Xiao Yan said. Lin Na's heart froze and she said, I also feel weird, Lei Yonghui. Here Lei Yonghui said. Lin Na said, go and check the situation. Hearing this, Lei Yonghui nodded, yes. Lei Yonghui left the room. Lei Yonghui wore waiter's clothes and pushed the dining cart to the door of the room. She raised her hand and knocked on the door. Sir, I am a waiter, and I deliver evening desserts. This is a benefit of the hotel. Sir, are you there? She waited quietly for a while, and there was no movement in the room. Lei Yonghui raised her hand again and knocked on the door. After waiting again, there was still no movement. Lei Yonghui said, Sir, I'm here to deliver evening desserts. Are you there, sir? Lei Yonghui responded with silence. After waiting for another minute, she raised her hand and knocked on the door again. Ta ta ta. Footsteps sounded from behind. Lei Yonghui looked back and saw Lin Na and others. Get out of the way, Lin Na frowned and said. Seeing Lei Yonghui get out of the way, Lin Na fired 2 shots at the lock. Bang bang. Lin Na kicked the door open. She rushed in with others and came to the bedroom. She held the handle and opened the door. Upon entering, there was no one in the bedroom. Damn it, Lin Na punched the door. There was a hint of shock on Qin Xiaoyan's face. How did this guy know we were there? Lin Na frowned and walked quickly to the window. She opened the window and looked down through the window, but Chen Tao was nowhere to be seen. Lin Na said, hurry up, call up the surveillance cameras around here, we need to know where that guy has gone. Good. However, when Chen Tao left, he drove a black lightning car and left the other world, and drove for half an hour. The monitor in the outer world obviously cannot take pictures of Chen Tao in the inner world. Lin Na adjusted all the nearby monitors, but found nothing. Lin Na slumped on the chair, rubbing her head in distress. All of a sudden, Black Swan lost sight of Chen Tao. At the same time, Chen Tao was driving towards Tal district. Ahead is the Dar district. The distance was far away, but Chen Tao could already see the border of Tal district in front of him. There is a 10-meter high wall on the other side of the border, and the wall is full of protruding spikes. This wall is difficult to climb by force. This wall was not built by the Dar district, but by Black Swan. To prevent criminals from Dar district from entering here again, it also prevents people from here from entering Dar district. The wall cannot be climbed, and the only access to the Dar area is a gate. At this moment, the door was closed, and there were 2 men wearing black clothes and holding rifles standing on the left and right of the door. In front of the gate, there is an iron fence. If you want to pass through this gate, it looks like you have to force your way through. Chen Tao slowly stopped the car. The 2 men looked at each other when they saw this. One of them walked out and stood in front of Chen Tao's car. He held a rifle in his hand and stared at Chen Tao in the car window, saying, "This is the border of the Dar district. You can't get any closer, otherwise we will shoot." Chen Tao got out of the car. As soon as he got out, the 2 men immediately raised their guns and pointed them at Chen Tao. "Get in the car and retreat. Otherwise we will shoot," the man narrowed his eyes and said coldly. Chen Tao's eyebrows stretched slightly, and he said, "I can't retreat." He raised his hands, and there were 2 more rifles in his hands. The man was slightly stunned, and he looked, but found that the rifle in his hand was gone. His face changed slightly. What happened? He hurriedly touched his waist, trying to take out the spare pistol. But when he touched it, he found that the pistol was gone. "Where is my gun?" came from behind. He looked back and found that his companion was also confused. "Are you looking for this?" Chen Tao threw the rifle in his hand to the ground. Then he took out 2 pistols from his waist. When the 2 men saw this, their eyes widened. Chen Tao raised his hand and pointed the gun at the 2 men. Bang bang. 2 gunshots. Ah! The 2 men covered their knees with their hands and fell to the ground, screaming. Hearing this scream, Chen Tao's eyebrows stretched slightly, and he threw the pistol to the ground. He walked around the 2 people and walked to the door. He looked at the door. The door was 5 meters high and was a heavy iron door. Chen Tao pressed the door with his hand and exerted a little force. The iron door did not move at all. Chen Tao looked at the door next to the big iron door. There was a combination lock next to the door. Seeing this combination lock, Chen Tao suddenly had a headache. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 28. Chen Tao is not a lock-picking expert. The lock cannot be opened at all, but if the lock cannot be opened, the door cannot be passed. What to do? Chen Tao thought of Xingyun and said, Xingyun, is there any way for me to open this lock? You can enter the other world. The code in the other world records the data of the password lock. A mechanical voice slowly sounded in Chen Tao's ears. Upon hearing this, Chen Daci entered the other world without hesitation. Time paused. Chen Tao raised his face and looked at the door in front of him. The door also turned into a blue code, which looked very strange. Chen Tao's eyes fell on the combination lock in front of him. Combination locks are now made up of codes, densely packed codes. Chen Tao raised his hand and opened the code below. There is no password here. These codes are either 1 or 0. I can't understand, Chen Tao said. Xingyun explained, this is the binary code of a computer. Anyone with knowledge of binary codes can understand it? Chen Tao said, I'm sorry, I have never studied computers. As a person from a slum, it is very good to go to school. He has never touched a computer in his life. Then you can use Nebula to convert it into decimal, Nebula explained. Hearing this, Chen Tao's heart moved. By the way, he remembered that Nebula said that it was a large computer in itself. Now that Chen Tao is the owner of Nebula, wouldn't it be easy to know through this Nebula? Chen Tao said, okay, you analyze it and tell me the password. Instruction received, parsing. Parsing completed, the password is 78392. Nebula's mechanical voice sounded in Chen Tao's mind. Chen Tao returned to the other world and entered the password he obtained from Nebula into the password lock. Boom. There was a muffled sound. The whole big iron gate trembled. The iron door slowly opened. The sun shines in through the cracks in the iron door. The iron door slowly opened, and the sunlight fell on Chen Tao. Chen Tao left the hotel last night, and it is already morning. There is a patch of wild grass in front of the iron gate, but looking through the patch of wild grass, you can see tall buildings standing in the distance. Black lightning automatically drove to Chen Tao's side and slowly stopped. The car door opens. Chen Tao got into the car. The car turned into a black shadow and crossed the border, entering the Dar district. After entering the Dar area, Chen Tao was no longer in a hurry and drove at a leisurely speed. When you pass the wall, you have reached the border of Dar district, which is not under the control of Black Swan. Black Swans can't be dealt with either. Then Chen Tao's wanted status doesn't matter. After passing a field of wild grass, the car entered the road and drove slowly towards the city. Chen Tao looked through the car window at the tall district not far away with its many buildings. For a moment, he felt a little strange. When he was in the slums, Chen Tao had always heard that Tal district was a sinful and evil place where criminals gathered. It was said that it was even poorer and more chaotic than the slums. But now Chen Tao looked at it from a distance and found that those rumors were wrong. The buildings in their district are towering into the sky, and those buildings are luxurious and exquisite. Without a little financial resources and technology, it is impossible to build such a complex of buildings. When looking at the city of Dar district from a distance, Chen Tao feels that Dar district can be compared to the wealthy district. The car entered the city and drove down the street. There are various shops on both sides of the street, including milk tea shops, snack bars, restaurants, etc. On the street, people were coming and going, boys and girls, walking around, talking and laughing, and shopping. There seems to be no difference between this Dar district and the wealthy district. It's strange. Is this the Tal district? It feels no different from the rich district, Ziyiqing said aloud. Chen Tao looked at Ziyiqing beside him, and there was doubt on Ziyiqing's face. Chen Tao said, we haven't eaten dinner or breakfast. Let's find a place to eat first. Ziyiqing hummed, okay. There is a hotel in front. Chen Tao got out of the car. Ziyiqing also followed Chen Tao out of the car. Ziyiqing looked at the bathrobe she was wearing, and her face turned slightly red. Noticing Ziyiqing's expression, Chen Tao looked around and landed on a clothing store not far away. Chen Tao took Ziching to the clothing store. You can eat food slowly, but buy Ziking's clothes quickly. Chen Tao didn't want his woman to wander around in a bathrobe. Chen Tao entered the clothing store. There was a woman over the counter. She was wearing a tight-fitting camisole paired with an ultra-short cylindrical leather skirt. She also wore a black fishnet outfit underneath. The tight-fitting outfit clung to her proud figure. Under the ultra-short leather skirt, a pair of long legs that are almost 1 meter long, paired with black high-heeled shoes, make her even taller. Her hair was tied into a high ponytail, revealing a delicate face. She looked here, watching Chen Tao come in. The woman looked at Chen Tao and said, "I need something." This woman's dress is a test of a man's determination, which is a bit different from the wealthy area. Chen Tao said, "My girlfriend needs some new clothes." The woman walked out from the counter. She looked at Ziching, and her eyes fell on Chen Tao. She crossed her arms and said, "We have clothes here at 3 prices, upper and middle. Which one do you want?" Chen Tao said, "First-class clothes." The woman's eyes lit up slightly, and she subconsciously looked at Chen Tao for a second time and said, "Follow me." The woman walked in. Chen Tao and Ziking followed. The woman took Chen Tao and Ziking upstairs. On the second floor, the woman said, "The clothes downstairs are all middle and lower class clothes, and the clothes here are all first class, using first class fabric brands." Chen Tao looked up and saw rows of hangers on the upper floor, with women's clothes of various styles on the hangers. There were also various women's clothes hanging on the walls. Chen Tao looked at Ziking and said, "Pick whichever you like." Ziking nodded. She walked in and looked at the clothes. The woman followed Ziking in and helped Ziking pick clothes. Looking at this scene, Chen Tao watched quietly. Finally, Ziking picked 3 sets of clothes. Ziking changed into one set and walked in front of Chen Tao. Ziking turned around in front of Chen Tao and said with a smile, "Does it look good?" Ziking was wearing a tight-fitting off-shoulder t-shirt, with fair shoulders and a tight waist, and the upper body pushed the fabric up high. She was wearing a tight black leather skirt with black stockings and a pair of high heels. This tight outfit perfectly outlined her tall and surprisingly mature figure. Chen Tao nodded slightly and said, "It looks good." Ziking smiled. 3 sets of clothes, worth 20 years, the woman said lightly. 20 years, this price is a bit scary. For an ordinary person, a month of hard work only earns 60 days of money. These 20 years are a lot of money for ordinary people. Chen Tao was too lazy to say anything and raised his wrist. The woman was slightly startled. "Pay directly." Chen Tao said, "I don't like using bank cards." The woman looked at Chen Tao and raised her hand. The two touched their wrists. Chen Tao gave the woman 20 years. The woman watched the time on her wrist increase at a visible speed, and her eyes slowly lit up. Chen Tao retracted his hand. The woman looked at the extra 20 years on her wrist, and she couldn't help but look at Chen Tao more, saying, "People as generous as you are rare." Generous, Chen Tao looked at the woman, not quite knowing what she was talking about. The woman said, "Although I said that these 3 sets of clothes are worth 20 years, in fact, I am ready to let you bargain. I was going to sell it to you for 5 years. Chen Tao was slightly startled. He looked at the woman, and said, "Well, it's really rare to buy clothes without bargaining. But you are also quite rare." The woman looked at Chen Tao. Chen Tao said, "You took the money, shouldn't you keep it well? Now that you say it, isn't it a bit bad?" The woman's expressionless face showed a smile. She said, "The reason why I said it is that I want to make friends with you. My name is He Yuxuan, what about you?" The woman, who had always had a cold face, this smile made her feel like an iceberg melting. Making friends. This woman probably was attracted by Chen Tao's generosity, so she wanted to make friends and bring Chen Tao closer to her. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 29. Friends. Although Chen Tao knew that this woman's purpose in making friends with him was not simple, Chen Tao really needed a friend now. Chen Tao stretched out his hand, shook the woman's hand, and said, "My name is Chen Tao." He Yuxuan hummed. She smiled, and said, "Nice to meet you. It's not convenient to talk here. Let's go downstairs." Chen Tao said, "Okay." The three of them went downstairs, and He Yuxuan said to a woman who was sorting her clothes, "Xiaoyu, take a look at the store." The girl called Xiaoyu nodded slightly and said, "Okay, store manager." He Yuxuan took Chen Tao and Ziyiqing into the back room. After entering the door, Chen Tao found that there was a living room with sofas and tables. He Yuxuan said, "Sit down." As she said that, she sat on the sofa and crossed her legs. She looked at Chen Tao and said, "You came from the rich area, right?" When Chen Tao heard this, he looked at He Yuxuan and said, "How do you know?" He Yuxuan showed a smile and said, "The reason is very simple. You don't have the aura of a Tar district person. In our Tar district, time is everything to us. For time, we can do anything. Like buying clothes, there is no such thing as bargaining among our people. So, I judge that you are from the rich area." Hearing this, Chen Tao said, "You guessed it right. This is my first time here, and I feel a little strange. We said over there that Tal district is home to criminals from all over the world, and it is a symbol of chaos and evil. But when I arrived, when I looked at it, I found that there was no difference between this place and the rich area. Why? This is why he needs a friend. He knows too little about the Tal district. It's important to have someone you can talk to." He Yuxuan crossed her arms and leaned against the back of the sofa and said, "Not all criminals are murderers. There are many criminals who have no choice but to take the path of crime. If there can be peace, then who will choose to commit crime?" He Yuxuan continued, "Moreover, it has been more than 500 years since the Tal district appeared. After so many years of accumulation, many people who came here have their own children and lives. Most of the people are pretty good." Chen Tao said, "So that's it?" He Yuxuan looked at Chen Tao, and she smiled. Chen Tao looked at He Yuxuan and said, "I think the development in Tal district is similar to that in the wealthy district. Why do you say that time is so important in Tal district?" He could listen to what she said just now. The people here would do anything for time. He Yuxuan looked at Chen Tao and said, "It is indeed peaceful here, but there is no black swan law here. If you have a lot of time, you can do whatever you want. You can become a class that entertains others, but if you don't have time, you can only be the entertained class. Can you do whatever you want?" Chen Tao said, "What do you mean?" He Yuxuan smiled and said, "It means that in Tal district, everything you see is clearly priced. As long as you have time, you can buy anything you see." Chen Tao's heart moved. He looked at He Yuxuan and said tentatively, "You mean, if I have enough time, I can buy you?" He Yuxuan was slightly startled, then she smiled and said, "It's not easy to buy me, and my price is not low." "How much?" Chen Tao asked. Seeing how serious Chen Tao was, He Yuxuan slowly put away her smile and said, 2,000 years. 1,000 years, this price, is an astronomical figure to ordinary people. With such an astronomical figure, let alone ordinary people, even the rich in wealthy areas cannot afford such a price. Chen Tao said, "Well, I have another question." He looked at He Yuxuan and said, "If I buy you, then we can be sure that you won't turn your back on me when time comes. There is no black swan law to limit you here. If you run away, It seems like there's nothing I can do about you. He Yuxuan showed a smile and said, it's simple, you just need to buy me and implant nano ants into me. She pulled out the cabinet under the table, took out a box from it, and moved the box to Chen Tao. This box is made of glass. If you look inside through the glass, you can see a small bug inside. The bug is made of machinery. It was running and struggling inside the glass box, trying to get out of the box. He Yuxuan said, this is a high-tech product nano ant unique to the Tal district. As long as you drop blood on it, it will obtain your DNA and become a nano ant that belongs to you. It will only accept your DNA order. He Yuxuan looked at Chen Tao, it can penetrate into a person's body and reach the person's heart. As long as you give an order, it will penetrate the other person's heart and cause fatal damage to that person. This kind of nano ant has a restriction, that is, when it penetrates into the human body, it must be with the consent of the person. She continued, with it, you don't have to worry about me turning my back on you. But He Yuxuan looked at Chen Tao and said, can you afford it in 2,000 years? With a smile in her eyes, she said, okay, the joke is over, I have to go back to work. As she said that, she stood up. In He Yuxuan's opinion, Chen Tao was just trying out a joke. She didn't think Chen Tao could spare 2,000 years. You know, that's 2,000 years. More than 90% of the people in this world probably haven't seen 2,000 years on a person. He Yuxuan didn't intend to sell herself, so she said such an astronomical figure. In her opinion, Chen Tao couldn't possibly spare so much time. Chen Tao said, what? Do you think I'm kidding? He Yuxuan paused slightly, she turned slightly and looked at Chen Tao, her eyes were shining with a little puzzlement, a little surprised. Chen Tao stood up, looked at He Yuxuan, and said, I just came here and need a guide. If you are willing, I can buy you to be my guide. The light in He Yuxuan's eyes was trembling. She frowned, looked at Chen Tao, and said, do you really have 2,000 years? Chen Tao looked at He Yuxuan and said, sell it. He Yuxuan pursed her thin lips, looked at Chen Tao, smiled, and said, if you dare to give it, of course I dare to sell it. Chen Tao stood up, looked at He Yuxuan, and said, then, stretch out your hand, I will give you time. He Yuxuan's eyes trembled slightly, she approached Chen Tao and raised her hand. The two hands touched each other. Under He Yuxuan's astonished gaze, the time on her wrist increased rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. 1 year. 10 years. 100 years. 1,000 years. 2,000 years. Chen Tao slowly retracted his hand. He Yuxuan looked at the time on her wrist, and her eyes trembled a little. It's really 2,000 years, a full 2,000 years. He Yuxuan was a little stunned. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 30. Chen Tao looked at He Yuxuan and said, is it okay? He Yuxuan stared blankly at the time on her wrist. She looked at Chen Tao, how do you have so much time? Chen Tao said, it's not important. What's important is that you are mine now. These words made He Yuxuan look at Chen Tao, and she said, the nano ants. Chen Tao interrupted He Yuxuan and said, no, I believe you. He Yuxuan looked at Chen Tao and smiled, without the restrictions of nano ants, I can't guarantee whether I will run away. Hearing this, Chen Tao looked at her and said, I believe you wouldn't do such a stupid thing. He Yuxuan crossed her arms and said, of course, someone who can easily throw away 2,000 years will be attracted by a rich man. I think no one who is not stupid can abandon a rich man. Chen Tao smiled slightly and said, what you said is quite true. He Yuxuan breathed a sigh of relief. She looked at Chen Tao and said, then what do you want me to do next? All joking aside, these 2,000 years were enough to shock He Yuxuan's soul. As a shrewd woman, He Yuxuan certainly knew that the man in front of her was extraordinary. Even if there were no nano-ants as a restriction, she would not choose to miss the great opportunity to stay with this man. Chen Tao said, "My girlfriend and I are a little hungry now. We plan to go to the restaurant opposite to have something to eat. Let's talk about other things while eating." He Yuxuan said, "Okay." Chen Tao took the two women into the restaurant. The three of them found a seat and sat down. A waitress in professional attire came over. She looked at the three of them, and her eyes fell on Chen Tao. "What do you need, sir?" Chen Tao picked up the menu and looked at it. He said, "Give me one of the dishes on this page." He pointed at the items on the menu and handed them to the waitress. The waitress was stunned for a moment. She looked at the menu, and then looked at Chen Tao. "Sir, the prices on this page are not low." Chen Tao looked at the waitress and said, "Do you think I can't afford it?" The waitress pursed her thin lips and subconsciously glanced at Chen Tao's wrist, but his wrist was wrapped in a bandage and could not be seen at all. She really felt that Chen Tao might not be able to afford it. After all, Chen Tao was so angry that the total price of the things on that page was not low. "You think he can't afford it? What do you think of me?" He Yuxuan said aloud. The waitress was startled, and her eyes fell on He Yuxuan. He Yuxuan looked at the waitress expressionlessly. The waitress was slightly startled. She looked at He Yuxuan intently. Her eyes lit up slightly and she said, "Aren't you the manager of the clothing store opposite?" He Yuxuan stretched her eyebrows slightly and said, "It's me." The waitress smiled and said, "It'll be easy if you're here. I'll go get someone to cook." The waitress turned and left. When Ziyiqing saw this, she said, "If someone orders more things, the other waiters will probably be happy, but this waiter is still worried that the guests will not be able to pay back the money." He Yuxuan smiled and said, "It's normal. If something goes wrong, the waiter will be punished with time." Ziyiqing said, "It's really strange." He Yuxuan said, "It's mainly because you two are strangers that she doesn't trust you so much. If you can get more familiar with each other, I believe she won't say anything." Cuckoo. Suddenly, a voice sounded. It was the sound coming from Ziyiqing's stomach. Ziyiqing blushed and touched her flat belly. Looking at Ziyiqing's expression, Chen Tao raised his hand and gently stroked Ziyiqing's hair. Ziyiqing slowly approached Chen Tao and rested her little head on Chen Tao's shoulder. Chen Tao gently held her shoulders and kissed her hair. "Smell her hair." Ziyiqing had a smile on her face. Chen Tao was too lazy to say anything and started eating first. Ziyiqing is hungry, and Chen Tao is also hungry. He didn't eat dinner last night, and it's almost noon now. Of course he was hungry too. Not long after, the things were delivered. Without the interruption of Black Swan, Chen Tao and Ziyiqing took their knives and forks and quietly cut and ate the steak. Crack. I'm sorry." Suddenly, Chen Tao heard a voice. He looked towards the source of the sound. "I saw a waitress hurriedly wiping a fat middle-aged man with a napkin. The white shirt on the middle-aged man was already soaked. Next to it were broken glasses and bottles. The middle-aged man looked ugly. He waved his hand and pushed the waitress away. The waitress was pushed hard and her body fell to the ground. She quickly got up. The middle-aged man stood up suddenly, raised his foot, and stepped on the waitress's face. Bang! Ah, there was a bright red footprint on the waitress's face. She quickly covered her head with her hands. The middle-aged man felt annoyed and kicked the waitress. "Ah! No, don't hit. Don't hit," the waitress begged loudly for mercy. The people nearby looked on indifferently, and no one came out to help. "Stop!" Suddenly, a voice sounded. When the middle-aged man heard this, he stopped and looked at the source of the sound. Chen Tao stood aside and looked over. The middle-aged man's expression darkened slightly, and he said, Where did this brat come from and dare to interfere in my business? Chen Tao thought he was not a good person. He could watch a young girl die on the road without any emotional fluctuations in his heart. But seeing a woman being beaten to death, even Chen Tao did not want to see it. When the waitress saw this, she hurriedly got up and ran to Chen Tao's side. She looked at the middle-aged man nervously. He stared at the waitress and said, "You dare to run? Come here." The waitress shook her head. The middle-aged man narrowed his eyes and said, "Oh, my words, Wang Xing, have no effect in your broken restaurant, right? Boss Wang, don't be angry at this time," a voice came. Chen Tao looked back and saw a man in a black suit running over here. He had a flattering smile on his face. He ran over here, rubbing his hands, looking at the middle-aged man apologetically, and said, "Boss Wang, what is the situation now? Can you tell me?" The man had a sign on his chest, and the sign read, "Hall Supervisor Li Hao." Wang Xing stared at Li Hao coldly and said, "What do you mean? Look at my clothes, they were all splashed by your people. Do you not want this store anymore?" When Li Hao heard this, his face sank and he looked at the waitress fiercely. The waitress turned pale. Li Hao stared at the waitress and said, "Lian Yaoding, come here." Lian Yaoding turned pale, she covered her face and walked towards Li Hao anxiously. Li Hao looked at Lian Yaoding and said, "Why don't you apologize quickly?" Lian Yaoding turned pale, she hurriedly said to Wang Xing, I'm sorry, Boss Wang, I'm sorry." Wang Xing narrowed his eyes, "Apologize, is an apology useful? Li Hao, I tell you, if you still want this store, let me take this woman away, I want to let her know the consequences of offending me." "No. No," Lian Yaoding turned pale, she looked at Li Hao in horror and said, "Brother Li, no, I can't go, he will kill me." Li Hao hesitated. Wang Xing narrowed his eyes, looked at Li Hao, and said, "Why? Are you reluctant? Li Hao, if you don't hand this guy over today, with the power of my company, I can make your restaurant no longer exist tomorrow. Then I want to see how you will explain to your boss." Li Hao's face sank, and he pushed away Lian Yaoding who was holding his hand. Lian Yaoding was pushed to the ground. She looked at Li Hao in panic and said, "Brother Li." Li Hao said coldly, "Shut up, if you offend Boss Wang, no one can save you." As he said that, Li Hao looked at Wang Xing, and he smiled and said, "Boss Wang, then this woman will be handed over to you." Humph! Wang Xing showed a sneer, he stared at Lian Yaoding, raised his hand, and grabbed Lian Yaoding's hand, "Come out with me." "No. No," Lian Yaoding struggled hard. But Wang Xing pulled hard, and Lian Yaoding's body was forcibly dragged out. Lian Yaoding's face was full of despair. "Have you forgotten me?" Chen Tao's voice sounded again. Hearing this voice, Wang Xing paused slightly. Lian Yaoding looked at Chen Tao who was speaking, and there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes.